of Stephen Hero by Irish novelist James Joyce. By an epiphany, Stephen meant a sudden spiritual manifestation in a memorial phase of the mind itself. He believed that epiphanies should be recorded with extreme care, seeing that they are the most delicate and evanescent of moments. He told his friend that the clock that they passed each day was capable of producing an epiphany. His friend questioned the inscrutable dial of the clock with his no less inscrutable countenance. "Yes," said Stephen, "I will pass it time after time, allude to it, refer to it, catch a glimpse of it. It is only an item in the catalog of the city street furniture. Then all at once I see it, and I know at once what it is, an epiphany." What? Imagine my glimpses at that clock, at the gropings of a spiritual eye, which seeks to adjust its vision to an exact focus. The moment the focus is reached, the object is epiphanized. It's just this epiphany that I find the supreme quality of beauty. And the words of Admiral Richard Byrd. I paused to listen to the silence. My breath crystallized as it passed my cheeks, drifted on a breeze gentler than a whisper. My frozen breath hung like a cloud overhead. The day was dying, the night was being born, but with great peace. Here was the imponderable processes and forces of the cosmos, harmonious and soundless. Harmony, that was it. That was what came out of the silence, a gentle rhythm, the strain of a perfect chord. It was enough to catch the rhythm momentarily, to be myself a part of it. In that instance, I could feel no doubt of man's oneness with the universe. The conviction came that the rhythm was too orderly, too harmonious, and too perfect to be a product of blind chance, that, therefore, there must be purpose in the whole, and that man was part of that whole and not an accidental offshoot. It was a feeling that transcended reason. The universe was a cosmos, not a chaos. Man was as rightfully a part of the cosmos as were the day and night. I admit, I love the wise man's story. It's one of my favorite parts of the many stories surrounding the birth of Jesus. The wise men are such unique and mysterious characters in that story. They're so mysterious that we add a lot to the almost maddeningly concise story in the Gospel of Matthew that isn't actually there. First, we often call them kings. The story talked about the Three Kings Day. The song we'll sing after this sermon, one of my favorites, is "We Are the Three Kings of Oriadar." There is nothing, however, in the text or in the historical scholarship to suggest that they were even kings. This notion is a thought to have risen as people searched the Hebrew Scriptures for a foretelling of the event and found verses such as Psalm 72, 10 and 11. May the kings of Tarshish and the isles render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Sheba bring gifts. May all kings fall down before him, all nations give him service. It is thought by some scholars that these words were quite possibly referring to King Solomon's coronation. And outside of the mistaken identity as kings, there is no particular reason to even think that there were three of them. Scholars imagine that we came up with three wise men because there were three separate presents: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We even came up with three names from God knows where. Anyone know who these are? Yes. Casper, Melchior, and Balthasar. Well, those names became settled upon somewhere in the 8th century, having arisen amongst other suggested names somewhere back in the 6th century, but of course, no historical basis. And I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing to add to a story. I think it's only points to our fascination with this piece of the story. But what, I wonder, can these wise men, however many there were, and whatever their names happen to be, what could these wise men tell us today? I've been thinking of this year in terms of Epiphany. Epiphany is, of course, the holiday that is celebrated in many Christian churches today. The holiday that is often associated with the arrival of the wise men in Bethlehem. But Epiphany is also a word that we use in other contexts. A dictionary defines Epiphany as a realization or comprehension of the essence or meaning of something or someone. An inspired understanding arising from connecting with a profound insight, awareness, or enlightened truth. James Joyce in the readings relates Epiphany to a sudden spiritual manifestation that allows us to focus in a particular way. That focus allowing us to see and recognize things as they are. The moment the focus is reached, he writes, the object is epiphanized. I love that word. You can let me know later if this sermon epiphanizes anything for you. How does Epiphany, the word, relate to Epiphany, the holiday? and especially to the wise men. As I was pondering this, I became aware that the wise men were unique in the birth story of Jesus because of something that didn't happen to them. They were not visited by an angel. Almost every main character of the story, if you combine Matthew and Luke, is visited by an angel that tells them, hey, listen up. No, don't be scared, but pay attention here. And then proceeds to tell them what will happen, what they should do, and what it will mean. An angel visits Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, even Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. The wise men don't receive this visit. They are not granted the favor of being told what's important by something or someone that is totally outside the realm of their experience, that they can do nothing but pay attention. They figure out the importance of things on their own. Or rather, the spiritual manifestation that James Joyce speaks of arises out of their normal experience and their own awareness. I imagine it happening for them like it happens for most of us. No chorus of angels, no divine pronouncements, no interpretation forthcoming. Now I know, you may say, what about the star? Star of wonder, star of night, star of royal beauty bright. The star was almost like an angel's visit, right? Calling them miraculously to journey so many miles to see a Jewish baby born in humble circumstances in Judea. But the star, as miraculous as we might imagine it, was not outside the realm of their normal experience. Scholars imagine that the Magi could have been Zoroastrian priests from Babylon. And Babylon was a key center for the study of astrology around the time of the birth of Jesus. They were astrologers. The star was not so miraculous, remember, that everyone followed its bright beacon. I used to wonder about that as a kid. What the heck did the other people think about this star? Like a 9 zillion watt bulb that rested over a stable? How could they just ignore it? No, only these magi recognized it. These astrologers, these students of the stars who astronomers speculate may have seen the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, or a comet, or maybe even a supernova. Whatever they saw, noticing astronomical events was part of their everyday lives, and their interpretation was up to them. Later, one of the wise men had a dream that warns us not to return to King Herod. You remember, who had evil things in store for Jesus because he's threatened by the new king of the Jews? But to go back home by another route. It may strike you that having such a dream is not unlike an angel's visit. But again, these Zoroastrian priests, these magi, were known for interpreting dreams. It was a common occurrence for them to explore their dreams for guidance. So, stars and dreams, as magical as they may appear to us, were normal parts of the lives of the magi, and in both cases, the interpretation was up to them. Unitarian-universalists, it strikes me, are epiphanizers of a sort. We have a focus on this world and seek to increase our awareness and appreciation of its wonders. We believe that meaning is made in the midst of our experience, not handed to us from outside. Realizing that we can't make epiphanies happen, we do believe that we can prepare ourselves for their arrival, and we welcome, celebrate, and proclaim them when they do happen. But we shouldn't leave our discussion of epiphanies without noticing that epiphanies are not always pleasant. Sometimes an awareness of what leaves us shaken. The interdependent web of all life, for example, while oftentimes experienced as the powerful feeling of harmony described by Admiral Richard Byrd in the reading, can also be, well, downright frightening. Listen to this passage from Moby Dick by Herman Melville, in which Melville's narrator, Ishmael, describes the rather perilous duty of holding on to his friend, Queequeg, by a rope from the whaling ship, while the latter inserts a blubber hook into a captured whale. From the ship's steep side did I hold Queequeg down there in the sea, by what is technically called in the fishery a monkey rope, attached to a strong strip of canvas belted around his waist. It was humorously perilous business for both of us, for before we proceed further, it must be said that the monkey rope was fast at both of us. Fast at Queequeg's broad canvas belt, and fast to my narrow leather one, so that for better or worse, we two for the time were wedded, and should poor Queequeg sink to rise no more, then both usage and honor demanded that instead of cutting the cord, it should drag me down to his wake. So strongly and metaphysically did I conceive of my situation then, that while earnestly watching his motions, I seemed distinctly to perceive that my own individuality was now merged in a joint stock company of two. that my free will had received a mortal wound, and that another's mistake or epiphany, misfortune, might plunge innocent me into unmerited disaster and death. And yet, still further pondering, I saw that this situation of mine was the precise situation of every mortal that breathes. Only, in most cases, she or he, in one way or another, has this Siamese connection with a plurality of other mortals. If your bank breaks, you snap. If your apothecary by mistake sends you poison in your pills, you die. True, you may say that by exceeding caution, you may possibly escape these and the multitudinous other evil chances of life. But handle Queequeg's monkey rope headlessly as I would, sometimes he jerked it so that I came very nearly sliding overboard. Nor could I possibly forget that. Do what I would do, I only had the management of one end of the rope. So, interdependence, while on the one hand offering us a deep sense of belonging in this life, as Byrd described, can also offer a rather frightening sense of insecurity, as Melville described. Our epiphany does not always have to be experienced as joy to be important. Sometimes the epiphany awakens us to changes that we must make, no matter how risky they feel. Sometimes an epiphany sweeps us away from things we once believed, leaving a deep sense of loss in its wake. Sometimes an epiphany brings with little or no comfort at all, except for the comfort that we feel when we ground ourselves in our very best approximation of what is true. This is one of the reasons I cringe when I hear folks say that Unitarian-Universalists believe whatever they want. No, Unitarian-Universalists believe what they must. If we are epiphanizers, leaving ourselves open to awareness, to a new and renewed focus of all that is, then we are open to what these epiphanies bring. Not what we want these epiphanies to bring. Sometimes the challenge is figuring out how to respond to the epiphanies we experience. Poet T.S. Eliot imagined a very different experience than the one we traditionally imagine in his poem entitled The Journey of the Magi. He begins with a picture of the journey itself. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year, for the journey is such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter, and the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, laying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out, and the lack of shelter, and the cities hostile, and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end we preferred to travel at night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. And he ends with a picture of a wise man who does not know what to do with his epiphany, who cannot face the ramifications of seeing what he has seen. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down. This set down, where we led all that way for birth or death. This was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but I had thought that they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our palaces, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death. Eliot points out the impossible danger of an epiphany. The new awareness we are granted can leave us uncomfortably out of place in our old existence. No longer at ease here in the old dispensation. We sometimes feel ourselves caught between two worlds, no longer able to return to our old one because of our new awareness, yet unwilling to enter the new one for fear of what might await us there. When we covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, we often hear that a sort of mamby-pamby, peace and love sort of statement that doesn't say much. We'll look at it this way, through the lens of an epiphany, we can see that spiritual growth is not a mamby-pamby matter. It takes courage. We need the support and encouragement of one another. And let's face it, epiphanies can be ignored. They can be denied. They can be lost in the clutter of the days. An epiphany is not a magical voice from outside. It is not a miraculous vision that transports us to another realm. It is not a divine intervention nor the sort of transcendent experience that lifts us above or beyond the everyday world. It is rather a heightened awareness of what we often treat as insignificant. It is a particular focus on what is plainly before us. An epiphany does not make a grand entrance. It is not loud or flashy. Rather, epiphanies come, as James Joyce says, in moments that are delicate and fleeting. We must work to preserve them, to record them with care, to respond to them. Can we afford to ignore them? Think of an epiphany that may have arisen in your life. It might feel big or small. It may have even been recent or long ago. Take a couple deep breaths as you let the feeling of that realization, that awareness fill you again. Picture it as a light that you hold within you. Find a place near your heart where you can keep that epiphany with you. Imagine what this epiphany might lead you to do in the future. Who knows what it may foretell? Who knows what uncommon life may yet again unfold? But why don't we give it a chance? Please stand and join me in singing 259, We Three Kings.